Just give me 2 seconds. Um, those on IG Live. I'm going live on YouTube right now. Sorry. Just give me 2 seconds. Just to make sure this is all right. Cool. Those on IG Live. But it's playing back. Cool. So yeah, we started the series Justice and Righteousness, Mercy and Grace. And Amos, he spoke on justice last week. And that's just the dominant narrative right now. And I'm gonna continue in that vein, um, from a different angle, obviously. So yeah, so we're gonna continue with justice. So if we turn to Isaiah 9:7, this is gonna be probably the anchor passage. Uh, Isaiah 9:7, it says, "Of the increase of his government and peace, there will be no end upon the throne of David and upon his kingdom, to order it and to establish it with judgment and with justice." Um, so we know Isaiah. That's like a very prophetic book. That's a book that speaks heavily on the coming of Christ, and this verse is no different. The preceding verse, it talks about like some of the names of Christ that we know him for, like the wise counselor, I believe. I can't remember, but the not verse 6 in chapter 9 has like some of his names that we know him for. It's like a very popular verse in Isaiah. And this verse, as the anchor passage, the second half, it talks about his kingdom, and in order to order it and to establish it with judgment and with justice. So my main point, or one of the main points, is like the goal of justice, the what justice seeks to accomplish. Justice seeks to accomplish order, God's order, like God's original order or his original design. Um, it's justice is its main function is to create order, to maintain order, or to reestablish it if order has been lost. And we see often in the Bible, God talks about judgment and justice. They're really used interchangeably. So it's kind of strange to me that both of these are used in the same verse, because it's usually one or the other, at least in the King James version. But we see that the purpose of justice in this verse, is to establish order. Is to establish order, and that's really what's been on my heart. Um, I guess during these times, and I guess a good way to liken it, um, in modern day terms, on a lighter note though, because everything we've been going through is kind of heavy. Happy Juneteenth also to everybody. You know, you see the fist one time, but um, on a lighter note, we can liken justice if we think about basketball for my sports fans, and I feel like everybody has at least a light or surface level understanding of basketball, right? When a foul is called on a layup or a jump shot, um, you know that is to maintain order, right? So if you're going up for a layup, somebody fouls you, however hard, the referee, which really plays the role of the judge on the court, calls a foul, right? And there's two things that comes from that call, right? So it's restorative, right? Because for every layup that you make, that's 2 points, right? And if you get fouled, it's likely that you're not going to make the layup. If you get fouled, that's like it's like just like a hard push that pretty much prevents you from making a basket. And so when a foul is called on a layup, you get 2 free throws. So the purpose of the foul call, of calling the foul, is to restore the 2 points that were lost. So you get 2 free shots worth 1 point each, and also to prevent, you know, things like that from happening again without consequence, right? So justice, so that is on the basketball court, a foul call is an example of justice being had, right? It serves the purpose of, it serves preventative purposes and equitable purposes, right? So you still gain, or at least have the opportunity to gain what was lost, and even the time stops, right? Because as basketball is going on, there's a clock, right? So when a foul is called, even the clock even stops. So that's just an example of like how justice is meant to function, right? How law and order is meant to function, and some of the things that are put in place to ensure these things. If we turn to Isaiah 5:7, and this is going to be, I'm trying to make this as fast as possible because, yeah. If we turn to Isaiah 5, verse 7, and then I'm going to read from 14 to 16. It says, for the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the men of Judah are his pleasant plant. He looks for justice, but behold, oppression, for righteousness, but behold, a cry for help. Therefore, Sheol has enlarged itself and opened its mouth beyond measure, their glory and their multitude and their pomp, and he who is jubilant shall descend into it. People will be brought down, each man will be humbled, and the eyes of the lofty will be humbled, but the Lord of hosts will be exalted in judgment, and God, who is holy, will be hallowed in righteousness. So again, we see verse 7, it kind of shows what is present, like what is expected, but what is actually present. Looking for justice in verse 7, he saw oppression, right? And again, this is all relevant to the times that we're in. And then, but 14 to 16 is justice being had, right? And it shows the purpose of the justice. So it says like pretty much hell is opened up and it's going to devour these oppressors. And in 15 and 16, it says the reason why this happens. People will be brought down, each man will be humbled, and the eyes of the lofty will be humbled, but the Lord of hosts will be exalted. So we see that in this example, the oppressors, those people in the high places, when justice takes place, order is reestablished and they're brought down to the level of the common man. They're humbled at the end of the day. And a lot of times that's where justice lacks, right? That's if we look at actually I'll get to that. A lot of times, humility is, just that recognition of man to man, woman to woman, man to woman, as human beings and creations of God. A lot of times that's lacking, and a lot of times that can lead to these injustices if we're not seeing through the lens of God. So so I say all of this to say, God, takes matters into his own hands and serves justice to reestablish order, right? And I'm not talking about law and order in terms of the Constitution or in terms of any manual or man-made manual. I'm talking about like the biblical order that God designed. And like I'll pause here because so the thing about justice, right? A lot of this thing is through lenses. So, my nephew, he was born March 27th, 2018, right? I remember this very clearly. He was born, I think, in the afternoon, and I drove from Philly to Baltimore, and I got there in the evening. I got there probably like 7 p.m. or like 6, 7, maybe 8 even. I came straight from work. We knew he was coming, so I came, spent probably like 2 hours. He was born in at St. Agnes, and that's literally like across the street from my middle school, not far from downtown. And I get there, I spend some time with my nephew. I see him, and I say that to say, right? So the same day I go back to Philadelphia because I decided I didn't want to take off a day of work. So I go back that same night, and I'm probably about 5 minutes from my apartment. And when I'm getting to my apartment, like for those of you who've been there, if you're coming from like south, so like Baltimore up to Philadelphia, there's a bridge that you would take. If you take exit 13, you get onto this bridge, and that'll take you right into South Philly. And the bridge is a 2-lane bridge, right? So this is the same night, my nephew was born, right? And this 2-lane bridge, I'm near the end of this 2-lane bridge. I'm 5 minutes from my apartment, and there's an accident like right in front of me. This car just swerves, right? For no apparent reason, honestly, swerves and just smashes straight into the rail, into the guardrail. So like a month prior, I had seen an accident, and it was even worse. And I told myself, if that happens again, I'm gonna like get out of my car and help that person, because it was just so crazy to see it in real time. Like I saw people get out their cars and help him. Like his car was completely flipped, and they had to get out the car and pull him out. Like it was movie stuff. So when this happened, I was like very, proactive. I was like, all right, bet, park my car. Again, this is a 2-lane thing. So that means this whole bridge, traffic begins to build up because the car is crashed on one lane, and I stop my car on the other. So nobody's moving. You feel what I'm saying? So I get out my car, and in the car, 3 women, probably one in her 30s and 2 probably in their early 20s, and like 3 children. Again, this is the day my nephew was born. I just saw my nephew born, right? So this is probably almost 12 a.m. in Philadelphia. And, I'm like, oh, are you guys good? I offer them a ride. You need a ride to the ambulance. You need a ride to the hospital. I'm like, what do y'all need? So I begin to take the children, put them in my car. I'm like, yeah, can you take us to the ambulance? Or can you take us to the hospital? Give us a ride. So 2 of the women are getting out, and then they say, actually, we're on the run. And so could you just take us to like West Philly and just drop us? Because we're trying to leave before the police get here. I'm like, whoa. I said, hold on. I said, hold up. This changed very quickly. Like, how did I said, I don't know if I can do that. Like, you're on a run. I probably can't do that, miss. I'm sorry. So, the 2 younger women, they run. They literally run, leave the bridge, and like fade into the black of the night. And then one of the women, they stay with the car and stay with the kids. And I just noted the contrast, right? I just noted the contrast. Like again, I'm just coming from my nephew's birth, right? So, and my nephew at the hospital, he was surrounded by aunties and uncles on both sides, both sets of grandparents, both of his parents, right? His godfather, he was surrounded by love, by structure, by you could just look at him, and from the outside looking in, you could say he's probably going to be raised well, right? Like, God forbid something happened to, God forbid anything happened, but he has, an abundance of love to care for him at the end of the day. But then I look at these 3 kids, right? In this situation, they were like, they were probably toddlers, probably like 2 years old, these 3 children. I'm like, yo, they're literally like being raised in chaos, right? Like these 3 women just got into an accident for I don't know what. It looks like they were fighting because 2 of them were bloody. So I think one was fighting while driving and got hit, and that caused her to swerve. Not only that, the other 2 are on the run from the police. So they get out the car. I'm like, yo, these kids are just born in, chaos, right? And again, we all know that how that can shape your view, how that can shape your perspective, your lens of right and wrong, right? Because a lack of order, a lack of justice, a lot of times will the absence of it will the absence of order will skew your framework for justice, right? And it was just so crazy to me that that happened all in the span of like 5 hours, that I saw my nephew born in this structure, and then these 3 kids were living in chaos. And that's like also displays the the importance of order in life. I never also I remember when I was younger, I heard the sermon, and he said, the first thing that God showed Adam was order, right? That's what he woke up to, right? Like he could have been born, all the ingredients in a garden or in a forest or in a tropical forest, right? There's fruits in forests, there's food and animals, right? But it says specifically that God planted Adam in a garden, right? So he woke up to order, right? It just it helps to establish right from wrong, right? Just coming up in order and in structure, as opposed to coming up, in chaos. So moving forward, I say that to say I'm not sure. So let me look at my notes, because I'm not sure what I said that to say. So God's order, right? When it comes to man, this is one key that's very important and very relevant to the times we're in right now. And that is, I'm going to read from James 2, verse 4 to 9. Are you not partial in yourselves and become judges of evil thoughts? Hearken, my beloved brethren, hath not God chosen the poor of this world, rich in faith, and heirs of the kingdom which he hath promised to them that love him? But you have despised the poor. Do not rich men oppress you and draw you before the judgment seats? Do not they blaspheme thy worthy name by the which ye are called? If you fulfill the royal law according to the scripture, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself, you do well. But if you have respect to persons, you commit sin. So the main point in that is to not be a respecter of persons, essentially. There are classes, in this world. That's just, and that will forever be the case. There are kings and queens. There are poor. There are rich. Oh man, damn. Okay, I'm good. Sorry, I got a call. Please don't call me back. But they are rich. There are poor. There are kings. There are queens. There are peasants. Let me not say peasants. That's actually out of pocket. But there are regular civilians, but there are classes in this world, but the Bible instructs us, not to be a respecter of persons, not to be, that shouldn't determine how you treat that person, right? So you, as whether you're making, let's say you're making 80 grand, 100 grand, you're supposed to treat the millionaire who can probably get you to the millionaire status in the same way you treat the person who's not making as much money as you, right? And and that is, I guess, what's lacking largely in our criminal justice system, right? It's what we have seen. It seems is that these police are treating people who are considered to be lesser than them without the common decency that every man deserves, right? Let's just be clear, like every single person on this earth was created by God, right? Like you and I, nobody on this earth created anybody on this earth. So like I don't care how bad or how much you don't like that person, there's like a minimum level of respect for the simple fact that God values this person and sees this person as worth living, that you have to treat them like it's just period. Um, so yeah, so the God's order, right, is not it's not dependent on the structure of the government. It's not dependent on whether it's a kingdom or a democracy or a republic, right? Because we're called to treat people without respect for their title or respect for their class, right? There's just a common decency that you treat people with. And that's what we've seen is lacking. That's what we've seen is lacking. So I think some final things to think about, because I don't want to drag this, and I'm not truthfully the most qualified, truthfully. So, just some things to think about, some things I've thought about. Like, are we ready for justice? Are we ready for justice? I think that's a question that everybody should ask themselves. Um, everybody should ask themselves. First, we'll just look at the surface level things that we're looking at, right? Um, the police abusing their power. I think that's the. I feel like there's been smoking mirrors around what the real cause or what the real movement is. Um, for me, the way I see it, right, the way I see it is that police are abusing the power that they have, right? That's for me. And what I've liked is I think for the first time ever, they're looking beyond the problem and looking at what can be done to solve it. So three things I've heard is, defund the police, defund the police. That makes sense, right? And it's not to say completely take out all the money that is funding the police, but it's saying some of this money that these police are getting from overtime, are getting from just over policing of certain areas. Like, let's take some of that money and invest it directly into the community, right? That's a solution. I feel like people are actually thinking beyond what the actual problem is and thinking like what can be done to solve it. And so in that regard, I believe some people are ready for justice. Another solution that I've heard is longer trainings, right? They say that, like, the trainings to be a teacher, or a lot of less high risk jobs require so much a greater extent of training than a job that literally holds life and death in his hands, right? I think I forgot what the stats was, but I think in 3 months you can become a police officer, which is wild. That is wild, bro. Like, that is wild. That's like unacceptable. So longer trainings is one of the things that was proposed. And then another one that I really like also is, mandatory residency in the community where, police are policing, right? They have to have some attachment to this community. Otherwise, it's just a power trip. It can become a power trip, right? Because you have a gun, you have the title, and you have the authority. So if you're in a community that has no meaning to you besides maintaining order, then it's easy for you to pull the trigger. But if you live there, right, if these people are your neighbors, there's just a more delicate approach. So these are some of the solutions I've liked from what I've heard. From what I've heard, but from this climate in general, though, from this climate in general, I've thought about, like, what are some of the possible outcomes? What are some of the possible outcomes of this season, right? Of this season. Um, so I believe the work environment will be affected, will be one of the most affected spaces. Um, I don't know, somebody, sorry, let me mute area real quick. All right, cool. It was distracting me. But one of the possible outcomes, I believe, the workspace is going to be one of the most um, affected environments or affected spaces of life. And I say that in the sense that for us who are young professionals, when we go into the workplace as young African Americans, young Nigerian Americans, young Africans, period, Black people, there's an adjustment that is made, right? There's an adjustment that is made because 9 times out of 10, your work environment is maybe probably reflects, even more so, it reflects the society at large, right? This nation is 60% white, right? And a lot of times our professional environments are even more skewed, maybe 70, 80% white. I think on my team, I think it's probably about 15 people. It's 2 Black people. It's me and somebody I went to school with, right? Well, she graduated maybe a year before me, and we're the only 2 Black people on our team, right? And so, when we go into work, there is an adjustment that is made. There's a slight change in the inflection of our voices. We don't speak in our natural lingo. Things change a bit. You feel what I'm saying? And that's just what happens, right? When you're just in an environment for a long period of time, whether you want to or not, you adjust to the environment, right? And I think one of the adjustments that will be made, is more intentionality with your culture or your Blackness or your Nigerian or your African Americanness, whatever demographic that you come from or you relate to, your Philadelphianism or your Baltimoreanism, whatever it is, I feel like people will be more intentional about taking that into the workspace. And I believe the outcome of that is that the white people, right, people of other demographics will have to face that same adjustment in the coming years. I believe that they will have to adjust in the way we've had to adjust, right? Maybe not mutually, maybe not to the same extent, but there will be a larger consciousness of the way they speak and the way I speak. You feel what I'm saying? That there will be a more mutual understanding. And I believe honestly, what can come from that, are good things, but I can see bitterness coming from that too, right? Because if you think about, like, white people have had, their hand on the pulse or their finger on the pulse of America and the standard of America since its inception, right? So if something is coming to, you know, uh, disturb what seems to be the natural order, you know, at first they might be for it, right? At first, and I'm just speaking naturally, just like naturally how things go. Like at first you might be cool with something. I'll like, yeah, I'm for it, but then it can get annoying. Like, okay, I like how it was before. Like I like how the white standard was the standard, right? And I say that to say, I'm not sure because my phone went off again, but let me bring it back up. I say that to say that wow, stop calling me. Sorry, I got another call. But that can lead to bitterness on one side, and that can also lead to unsatisfaction on another. And another thing to be conscious of is the generation that's coming up now, that's watching these images, right? That's seeing, Black Lives Matter. Again, this is like, we've seen a shift for sure, like, in a lot of things. And I'm really trying to understand what this is going to mean. I don't know, but I think these are things to think about, because I think they have major consequence. I think they have major consequence. I'm not saying good or bad, but they have, major consequence. And I think it's important, that you know where you stand. I think it's very important that you know where you stand. I am for the upliftment of Black people. I'm absolutely for it, right? I'm absolutely for it. But just to be clear, I know a lot of people don't like to say this, and a lot of people don't, especially don't like to say it now or it to be heard. I'm a man of God before anything else. Like, just to be clear, I'm a man of God before anything else. Like, before anything else, there's no culture I identify with more. Like, I don't care if it's Nigerian, Yoruba. My father is from Yakoyo. I don't care if the culture is directly from his household. If it is counter to this scripture or this word of God, then it's X'd out. Like, bottom line, you feel what I'm saying? Like, it's X'd out. So, yes, I want Black people to progress, but I just want to be clear. Like, at the core of me, I'm a man of God before anything else. And I think it's important that we know where we stand, because, like, I see in these times, like, men and women of God may be, swaying with whatever's popular or whatever's like popular to say, popping to say. Like, I just want to be clear. Like, I'm a man of God first, so don't ask me to do anything that's against, what my Bible or the scripture tells me to do. Because again, like, in this is the first time in my 26 years of living, that I ask certain questions of myself, right? My father is, in his 60s. So to a degree, like, I'm the man of the crib, even though I'm not home most of the time, but like I'm the man of that house, of my father's house at this moment. My father is an elder statesman. I asked myself for the first time a couple of weeks ago, like, do I need a gun? You feel what I'm saying? Like, and again, like, but because I think, again, we have to understand, like, the implications of these times, right? A generation is being bred, right? Because there's still people from the deep South who's not with this Black Lives Matter. Like, all I'm saying is, like, let's understand. Um, it seems peachy, right? These protests, it can, again, I think I said this a few months ago, it can change very quickly. Like, it can change very quickly. I don't think it takes that much, right? So I think we have to ask ourselves, let's say to the men right now, a lot of us don't maybe have wives, right? Or you may be overwhelmingly, I'm for peace, period. So, like, that's where I stand. I'm not buying a gun. I don't need a gun. God will hold me down, will hold my family down. Somebody like Victor may be in a different situation. I have a wife. She may have at some point she may have a kid. Like, I'm for peace, but I need to protect my wife, period. So I need protection, period. That's just what it is. If something was to go down. Like, these are hard questions to ask, but I think they're questions that we need to look at, though, honestly. And I think it's important that we establish where we stand right now. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's not I think it's in these times, like, where we start to understand, we see a little bit of shakiness, a little bit of movement going on outside. I think these are the times you start to answer these questions for yourselves. Like, where exactly do you stand, right? Before your emotions can blur you fully, like, before it really turns up, when it's still somewhat calm, like, I think you need to establish your standards, establish where you stand. Like, yo, my nephew, can't nothing happen to him, period. So if things were to turn up, I know where I stand. Like, I need a certain amount of protection, right? Or, again, I'm being very radical right now, but, like, honestly, for the first time in my 26 years, again, this is the first time that I've asked myself these type of questions, like, would I need a gun, or would I need, these things, because I, I believe this is breeding something beneath the surface that may not be as clear. It may not be as clear. So, again, I just encourage everybody to establish where they stand, right? Like, whatever conviction that you have, I'm overwhelmingly for peace. We need those type of people, right? Martin Luther King, he was overwhelmingly for peace. Like, and we need those type of people. We need the peacemakers. But there are men of war in the Bible, though, to be clear. And there, I'm not saying war is coming or anything like that. And so it may sound crazy, but let's just establish where we stand on certain things. Are you? Is it black or nothing? Right? Are you siding with black over everything, or is, like, man or woman of God is first, and if this white person aligns more with this scripture than that black person, I may have to side with this white person. I think you have to establish that now, right? I think we have to establish these things now, right? Again, because, like, one of the problems a lot of times when God brings justice is that the people are not prepared for it, right? They cry for justice. Like, a lot of people and there's men and women of God right now crying for justice. But in the Bible, so many times they cry for justice, and when God brings it, they're not prepared. They're not prepared for that justice. They actually, a lot of times, they would prefer the slavery that they were in, because this justice is just so overwhelming. I'm not ready for it. I actually prefer to be a slave. Even if we just recent history, right? It's by design, but the black people of this country were not prepared for freedom. Truthfully, they weren't prepared. They were deprived of education, deprived of self-worth. So when they got, like, it was a lot of scattering, right? And then there's a verse that says, I don't know if I read it, about the leaders. Did I read it? Yeah, for the leaders of this people caused them to go astray, and they are led and destroyed. I spoke to somebody who marched with Martin Luther King, and he said one of the issues was, like, because so much progress was made in the 60s, like, exponential progress in comparison to what's happened since, right? It was like it was a very definite, defined, intentional movement, right? They were very purposeful with every day, and very unified. Even though there was different ideologies, each ideology was very unified, and it caused America to shift forward so quickly, so quickly. And what happened? The leader was killed, right? And the movement scattered, right? And the movement, it scattered, it disassembled. Like we haven't seen anything like it since. We haven't seen anything like the 60s since the 60s, right? And I don't think not even this can compare, because I don't think people understand how consistent these people were for years. This wasn't a 2-month thing while COVID is going on. No, this is like my life is dedicated to this. I'm ready to go to prison for this, right? It was a difference. And now I'm just ranting. But that being said, let me just stop there. I just pray for everybody, right? God gives us like the discernment necessary, to know exactly where we stand. I pray that God's will is revealed to us, right? To just know how to navigate this. Because even though we identify with this movement, we are pretty much everybody on these calls are Black. Everybody. So it's not like we don't understand. It's not like we're living in a vacuum. We don't live in a church building, right? We all go to work. We all go to school. We all have friends. I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. I've been seeing guns since I was 15, 16. I'm talking about people on house arrest carrying guns. This is like not new, right? I was in Baltimore when Freddie Gray was like, this is not new stuff, right? So I think it's important we establish where we stand, and I pray that God gives us the discernment to know, because it's important that we're ready when justice actually comes. It's not comfortable. Justice is not comfortable, right? So if justice actually comes, I pray that we're prepared for it, that we've thought beyond Judgment Day and like what we want the world to actually look like and our role in that. And yeah, let me just end it there before I keep on ranting. And and that's it. I don't know if Amos had the praise and worship, and thank you for joining, Amina, Laura. Appreciate y'all. So I'm gonna end it here. We're not gonna do too much discussion. We're just gonna do I think a quick praise. I don't know if Amos has that, and if we do, if not, then we'll just end.
You can just like
All right, Laura.
get off the YouTube so that I'll just like stream that. You still have a YouTube.
Oh, say it again. Oh, I'm still on YouTube.
Yeah.